Hello class, I decided to do my ethical issue over the Samsung Galaxy Note 7 battery issue that came up of the year of 2016 when Samsung released their Galaxy Note 7. For those of you who don't know, what happened was the Samsung Galaxy Note 7 released in October of 2016, and following the release of the phone, the batteries were exploding and catching on fire. So someone would be charging their phone or using it or doing anything on it, and just out of nowhere the battery would rupture and it would actually catch the phone on fire and cause a small explosion. There was a lot of homes that caught fire because of this. People were injured very severely because of this, whether it was them talking on the phone or the phone being in their pocket at the time. It even got so bad that the airports and airport security would not even let people on planes that owned a Galaxy Note 7 because of the uh, potential for the phone to catch on fire and explode. So I chose this as an ethical issue because of two reasons. One, I feel like it was an issue because Samsung, I feel like, rushed the phone into production and rushed it to market, and so therefore they did not have the time to actually test the phone properly. If they were to test the phone the way that I feel like it should have been tested, they would have noticed the issue before it was actually released to the public. So it wouldn't have been an issue that it was. And two, because just the fact that they didn't test it is a huge issue for me. Knowing that they let a phone into customers' hands that potentially did what it did, and the fact that they could have stopped it just by testing the phone a little bit longer rather than pushing it to market. I feel like that's a big issue because I feel like Samsung is a very competitive phone company when it comes to trying to grab market space. You think of Samsung versus Apple. Apple and Samsung come out with a new phone every year. So I feel like when Apple announced their phone is usually when Samsung start announcing their phones because they wait to see what they're doing. I think this is a bad business practice because it gets them into situations like this where they want to make a phone that's bigger and better, and they want to make sure that it's going to sell and appease people. But the issue with that is, again, whenever you get into those kind of competitions, you start making mistakes like Samsung made. They start rushing. They had an investigation, and Samsung actually came out and found what was wrong with the batteries is that there was a improper uh, cell configuration is what they called it, and when the battery was in the phone it actually started to short out, and that's what caused it to catch on fire and explode. I feel like this is an ethical issue for this reason is because it could have been avoided if they would have tested it. And so with that being said, there were so many people who were hurt because of it that didn't have to be hurt and shouldn't have been hurt if this phone would have been tested properly and the batteries would have been properly inspected, tested, and produced the way they were supposed to be produced. So we look at this as an ethical issue because, again, people were hurt. It's not just that someone's phone just didn't work. People were getting hurt because of it. So, and there was fires started, and there's memories of people's houses that they won't get back because a phone company just decided to rush something through to get it sold. I feel like it's an issue for Samsung as a company because, again, with trying to rush something through production, trying to rush it through to make sales profits, I feel like it's putting profits above customers at that point. You do not just go and put a phone into the wild that isn't properly and thoroughly tested and can cause potential damage to people. The sad thing is that even after they recalled the phone in November of 2016. They recalled the first phones, and even the second model they came out with the new and improved battery, that battery started messing up as well. And in the investigation they did, whenever they found out what was wrong with the batteries, the first batteries again were having a shorting issue with the board, so it would short out and catch fire and explode. The second battery that they had a welding defect that would cause the battery to catch on fire. And after that, they finally decided to just pull the phone altogether, stop selling it, and refund everyone who had bought the phone their money, as so that they could go and either buy a different Samsung phone or buy a new phone, different brand in general. I feel like Samsung faced this ethical dilemma, and the fact that they analyzed the consequences. If they didn't recall the phone, then they were going to have people still getting more phones blowing up, more phones catching on fire, which then leads to lawsuits that Samsung will have to face, because they're going to have to go through those investigations to see why the phone was messing up in the first place. And so that's going to cause, or that's going to bring more investigations into, well, why did this happen? Why did you skip this process and get it to market before it was ready? They analyzed their actions again. Once they did that first recall, they thought they had better batteries in their phones, but then the second model of the phone started doing the same thing. With that, I still feel like they should have taken more time. I feel like it was more of a band-aid fix at the time, that they went in and just started replacing batteries into different phones, thinking that it was going to work without properly testing the second batteries. They made the same mistake over again without testing the batteries and putting them into the phone. The phone was still catching on fire and still exploding. So when they finally made the decision, to stop selling the phone altogether and stop production. I feel like after the first phone, I understand they had to try to fix it, but I feel like after the first new models started messing up, they should have stopped production right then, because obviously they weren't doing something right, and they were going to continue to have issues. And we were supposed to talk about how we feel about the ethical dilemma. I feel like, again, because of the smartphone competitiveness and the fact that companies are trying to capture the smartphone market, I feel like this is a big factor into this ethical dilemma, because both companies, or all companies, are trying to catch that market value of people who buy phones. And because of that, they started making mistakes, started rushing things, and it's not right, because we as consumers, if I were to buy a Galaxy Note 7, I did not, but I'm just saying, if I were to buy one, I would expect that phone to work, because I'm expecting to buy a product that I assumed had been quality tested and gone through so many different regulations to be able to even be sold. So the fact that a phone got through, and it was and they were talking that there was over 100,000 cases of phones exploding or catching on fire worldwide. That's too big of a margin. There should not have been that many phones that were able to go through inspection and pass inspection, or to even get to market, that were allowed to do that. So that's what I feel. I feel like this shouldn't have been an issue, but because of the competitiveness that has been created in the smartphone market is what led to these mistakes to be able to be made. And I feel like that companies will learn from Samsung's mistake. They will understand that even though there's a competitiveness and that there's a market to be sold to, they need to take care and make sure their products are going to work before they try to sell them to people. I feel like this could have been avoided in the fact that, just taking more time. Like, I understand that phones, they try to release them at certain times, and they try to release them before other phones, and they want to make sure that they have the latest and greatest specs and functionality and features. They want to make sure that they're going to catch their consumer and give them what they want. But the problem with that is, again, we as people want so many new features, and we want them now, that we push and push and push, and we want it now, and we don't want to wait for them to do quality testing or to make sure the product is going to work the way it's supposed to. And I feel like we as consumers need to understand that even if it takes maybe another month for the phone to come out, who cares? If it's going to make sure, if I know they're taking the time to actually quality test the phone and make sure it's not going to explode in my pocket, I would rather them take a month than me buy a phone that has the potential of burning a hole in my leg or catching my house on fire. So I feel like in the future, Samsung did, after their investigation, make it to where they had an 8-step quality process before a battery could be placed in a phone, which should have been in place in the first place. There should not have been any way that a battery could have gone through that had the potential to explode. And I understand that nothing's perfect, but the fact that they have an 8-step process, I think, makes people feel better, Because the problem with this dilemma is it wasn't just that they weren't going to be able to sell phones anymore, it's that people got hurt because of their negligence and failure to actually look at what was going on with their phones and how they were being made. So I feel like in the future, more companies will learn from Samsung's mistake and that they will take the time to actually test their products and test them thoroughly so that mistakes like this won't be made again. Thank you.